Welcome back to Wish I Knew, the podcast where we explore the lessons, pivots, and defining moments that shape our lives and careers. My guest today is Julia Baldet, founder of Elevate Wellness, a brand that's redefining how we think about health, transparency, and conscious living. After starting her career in investment banking and private equity, Julia left the corporate world to build something she couldn't find, a wellness brand that's rooted in honesty and simplicity. We talked about leaving finance to start over in a completely new industry, what it means to build in public, going viral while sharing that journey, raising investment, and now becoming an angel investor herself. So with that, let's get into it. Julia Baldet, welcome to Wish I Knew. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much.
I have been so inspired by your story because we'll get into it, all the details. But in a nutshell, you started out your career working in private equity, left and recently founded the wellness brand Elevate, which we have here today. I'm really excited to try these smoothies. So I will be sipping on them
Yeah, you have to.
throughout. Can I actually try one now?
Yeah, you should. So I brought like a bit of everything, I would say. They're quite different flavors. So the first one, the purple one, is like the lean berries. It's a protein shake, basically.
Okay.
With like blueberries, peanut butter, creatine, kefir as well for gut health, and it has like 27 grams of protein.
Wow.
So good like lunch replacement option, I think.
Yeah.
The pink one in the middle is the glow. It's the most popular one. So it's like strawberry, banana, collagen smoothie, very fruity, very light. And then the yellow one is the golden boost. So it's more tropical flavors. So pineapple, passion fruit, mango, and a bit of like turmeric, ginger, and vitamin D because it's like winter. So we need a bit of a immunity boost for sure.
Yeah. Okay, I need all of them. That's for sure. I'm just drawn to the pink one. So can I try it now?
Yeah, of course. Try it.
Let's do it. Yum.
Glad you like it.
It's really nice. Okay. I'm going to try and sip this as we speak. So I hope that's okay. But thank you so much for bringing them in. I guess my first question for you is, what do you think your younger self who was working in private equity, feeling super burnt out, what do you think she would say if she could see you today?
Honestly, I think she'd be a bit like surprised in the sense that, I've left private equity finance. So a career that was very attached to, I would say, external like markers of success. To open a smoothie bar. I think she would be like, "Are you okay?" But I think she would also be proud because I've kind of like always knew that I wanted to open like my own business, having like my own brand. So I'm glad that I, made that happen for sure.
And what drew you to finance in the first place?
So if I have to be really honest, I never kind of like, I didn't grow up thinking, oh, I want to be, a M&A associate or private equity associate when I grow up. I actually had no idea about that. But I just kind of like, I loved it. Every topic at school, I was quite good at like every topic. So I didn't want to choose. So I ended up going to like business school and, it was quite generalist. And I always love a challenge. So when I heard about like finance, investment banking, I was like really drawn to that because it's very generalist. You need to be also very good with number, but not only. There is a big strategic aspect to the business you're reviewing and the projects you're working on. So that's really what drew me to that. And I think that there was also, in all fairness, the fact that it's an industry that is very prestigious, it pays well, and I thought that it could be a place where I could learn a lot and then decide eventually, if I like it or if I wanted to do something else. But the idea was really to kind of like not close any doors for myself.
It's so interesting. I actually started my career in finance, different side, wealth management.
No way.
But it's interesting that because you mentioned this concept of like external markers of success. And I felt like looking back, that was definitely a big driver for me in the sense of it pays really well. It's a, long-standing career where you can have you can have a very long and sort of fruitful career in the finance sector. I think as well, maybe the way that we've been influenced with like TV and movies and um, seeing success has typically been in more like traditional sectors as well. So I can definitely relate to you with some of those points. Do you feel like the external factors or your like definition of success then was different to what it would look like now?
100%. Because as I mentioned, I was not really, thinking, okay, what do I like? What's like my real passion, or what do I want to do with my life, where I want to go? It was more, for me to do like the best thing I could do. And in a way, I wanted to prove things like to myself, but also to others. So for sure, I think that my definition of success has like really changed since I've left that world. Um, because it was really relying more on like external markers, being like the salary, how well you were doing, how fast you were promoted, which I think is not a bad thing to have ambition. But I still have ambition today. It's just like my kind of like priorities have changed, because I've seen also the bad side of kind of like forgetting who you are, where you want to be, and trying to force yourself to fit into that mold. So I think that, it's more like a process that I've been through to be like, okay, this is what I value more, I would say now.
Mm. And when you were working in finance, what did you find it to be like? Is it as glamorous as you see on the TV screens and in the movies, or was it actually like really long hours and stressful?
So it's definitely less glamorous. I'm sorry to break the myth. Yeah, honestly, it was like very long hours. Depending on the projects I was working on, I could end up doing like over 100 hours a week.
Wow.
Easily, with like no weekends, no holidays. Or when I was away on holiday, I was always like go around with like my laptop, my two phones. And I think, people around me, like my family, my boyfriend, like my friends, they all thought that I was crazy for going through that. So it's definitely less glamorous than what we see in TVs. We don't like party with clients in like private members club or all these sort of things, or at least it's not what I've experienced. But yeah, there's definitely like a tough aspect of that. But also, you can't be paid like very large amount of money if you're not working that much. Like when
Yeah.
it's too good to be true, it doesn't exist. So
Mm. And how did you find like starting out your career? Did you find that, like you said, you were always on holidays? Do you felt like you maybe had to sacrifice other parts of your life in order to?
yeah, 100%. I think that I've kind of like paused everything else to just like focus on my career. I would say that one thing that is like really good when you start in investment banking, joining like a big bank like I did, it was just before COVID. You join with like 100 other people that are, all like not from London, like from all over like the world. So you have like really this class where you meet other people and they become your friends. So I think that in that regard, I was lucky to have like this support system in place and friends that would also understand like what it is like, and the fact that, okay, I'm sorry, I won't be able to make it to dinner. So I think that it's really important to have like this strong like support system in place, because otherwise it would have been like, I think, a very lonely place. But it was, my family is back in France as well, so that's very, for sure, I've put the rest on hold.
Yeah, and I think it's something that's quite common, right? And like I struggle or have struggled over the years with like when I'm working on something really big, you need to just lock in, and like
Yeah.
now I know how to communicate that with people better. But I think where I felt personally sort of felt down in the past is like trying to do everything and be there for everyone. And
Yeah.
people are getting married, and then I'm same as you on my laptop about to, go to someone's wedding, and it's hard, right? You can't be everything for everyone and also succeed and excel in an industry that is really competitive and requires your effort, right?
No, that's definitely true, and it's quite funny what you mentioned about the wedding. I was actually working on the Sunday brunch of my best friend's wedding. So I was literally in a room working on my laptop because my boss was like harassing me and be like, you need to send this now. And I remember I was like crying. I was feeling so bad because of course it was like my best friend's wedding and I was just like miserable. And she was like, it's fine, don't worry. But it's this type of situation where, it's kind of like a situation that kind of like helped me to realize that this is not normal. I agree it's normal to kind of like lock in, but it's also really important, I would say, to set boundaries and also know how to prioritize what's important for you. And I think that for me, I just arrived at a stage where I was not like, I didn't have the freedom to also prioritize and say, hey, actually, I have like this very important event and I really can't miss that. So I didn't have this flexibility at all, which kind of like in a way pushed me to be where I am right now. So in hindsight, it's kind of a blessing is in disguise for sure.
Definitely. And so were you aware with those little moments, were they all kind of building up inside to maybe you thinking this isn't going to be it?
Yeah, definitely. Because, I think I've always been like a good student, like working a lot, and I've always like put this pressure on myself. And no one has kind of asked me, to do all of those things. It was just like myself being like, oh yeah, I want to be like the best performer. I want to be this, and kind of like succeed in finance and go very far in that path. But it's just like the accumulation of things where I just reached a point where I felt really miserable. I was really burnt out. And I just kind of paused, took a step back and thought, wait a minute, like if I was actually speaking with a friend, I would tell her that this is not normal. You can't live your life like that. And, I was a bit, the tricky part with that is with finance in general or this kind of like industry is that I think you're always waiting for, the next bonus, the next promotion, and you think, okay, next year I'm gonna quit and find something else. And you kind of like get stuck in that loop. So I'm kind of glad that I, managed to take a step back and look at that and thought, okay, this is really not like normal and this is not taking me closer to where I want to be in like 5 to 10 years. So this needs to stop now.
It's incredible because so many people do get caught in that trap, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's a very big corporate tactic in the sense of like there's always a bonus or a pay rise or shares coming, and you can have the exact same mindset that you've just described. You could be like, okay, I'm going to do this until the next
Yeah.
bonus or the next amount of shares that I get, and then I'm out. But then by that time comes, you've got another one coming, and you end up like in this cycle of like forever chasing that reward that's in front of you, but not thinking about like longer term and the bigger picture, right? So I think it's huge kudos to you to be able to like break that cycle quite early as soon as you like could see it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think that was also something that I realized in the sense that, I was kind of like, I was not like senior enough to have any kind of like shares in the company we're involved in. And I was actually getting very close to this point where I was like, actually, if I start like getting this type of incentive, it's going to be really hard to just like say no and leave it on the table. And I completely agree with what you say in the sense that you're always chasing this next thing. And next thing you've kind of like upgraded your lifestyle as well, and maybe you've bought a house and you have now a mortgage and now you used to go on holiday in certain places. So I think it's like really really hard to kind of like break from that cycle, and that was possibly one of the hardest things to do from my experience, to be like, okay, I'm living, I'm gonna do something really different, and to also go back to the markers of success. I think people being like, are you okay, like what is going on?
That was going to be what I was going to ask you next. Like, what was everyone's initial reaction when you said you were going to go? And did you say you're going to go and launch a smoothie brand, or?
So I said initially because I was afraid of like saying what I would do, which is, maybe it's stupid, but at the beginning I was like, oh no, I'm gonna get judged. Because when you think about it, like a smoothie brand is not like glamorous, and some people told me like literally, are you okay? And I know that some people also said like to other friends of mine or colleague being like, yeah, I think she's making like a big mistake. So that's why I wanted to kind of like delay the time, that the moment where I have to communicate about like what I was doing. But I was very clear in the vision I had. Like when I left, I never left to say, oh, I'm going to open like a cute smoothie bar and just have one. I always knew that I wanted to build like a multi-million-dollar brand, if that makes sense. So for me, it was really try to, for me, the thing that kind of like helped me was really to try to focus on the big picture rather than focus on the moment of being like, oh yeah, I'm leaving to do this. I was just when I left, I just said I'm going to take a bit of time to think about like what I want to do, but it's probably not going to be, you know, in finance. And also I kind of knew that worst case scenario I could still go back if anything was going wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, it takes so much courage, and I think other people's opinions are so strong in those moments. I had a similar experience when I left my corporate world recently, and everyone starts to get quite nosy as well, because I do a similar thing of saying, oh, you know, I'm just thinking about what's going to come next, and then I'm, you know, going to take some time out. And so many people were so nosy. What are you doing next? What are you, you know, what are you thinking? Are you going to do this? Are you going to do that? And I was a bit like, why is everyone, you know? And I actually didn't have a bit of a plan. You know, I had a kind of loose plan in the back of my head, but I thought, okay, let me
Take a step back.
take a step back and think about it first. But it's interesting because I feel like people do come in quite hot with their opinions when you decide to take bold leaps. And it's incredible because so many people probably do listen to those and think, oh yeah, actually, like, you're right, maybe I should stay on the corporate path. And, you know, what was it that you felt within you kind of gave you that self-resilience and trust to say, no, actually, I know that I'm on the right path here?
Oh, that's a tough one because it was really a tough period in the sense that, as you say, people get super nosy, and even, you know, some people that I used to work with that was not close to, or kind of like were never checking on me. I know they were asking to other people, being like, "Oh, so how is the project like going?" and everything. So it's true that when you kind of know that people start to get like nosy with what's going on and don't always have the best intention. Sometimes it's also to kind of like give their opinion, and you're like, okay, thank you, but you know, I don't necessarily ask you for that. I think that for me, I think that really kind of like helped me is one, realizing that worst case scenario, if I was trying to launch something and I would, you know, lose maybe 1 or 2 years from the corporate path. And I think that everything that I've done before is not lost, in the sense that if, you know, for whatever reason, tomorrow Elevate doesn't work and I'm like, okay, I want to go back to a more like corporate role, I think that it would just be a bonus. Maybe I would have lost 2 years compared to my peers, but who cares at the end of the day?
Yeah.
So I think that it's kind of like knowing that there is some sort of like safety net, if that makes sense, like that nothing is it's not like a decision that can't be changed. So realizing that, I think, kind of helped me. And I also thought that, you know, I'd rather take this risk than having like regrets. Because I kind of like, you know, I'm approaching my 30s and I kind of like realized that time goes so fast. That was like, okay, it's time to do it now before, you know, I'm actually married with kids and like a mortgage and some obligations. So I just thought that it was the right time. Plus, of course, all the accumulation of what happened at work and the fact that I was burned out and unhappy really with the whole situation, that created kind of like the perfect storm, I would say, for me to say, okay, it's time for me to try and enter this new chapter of my life.
One thing I didn't fully appreciate before running my own business was just how much mental energy everyday decisions take. When you're spinning a lot of different plates and always thinking a few steps ahead, even the small things can start to feel surprisingly draining. After leaving corporate to set up my business last year, I realized if I wanted to stay focused and make good decisions consistently, I needed to simplify wherever I could, especially when it came to my health. When it comes to supplements, though, I've always really struggled with consistency, mostly because I felt so overwhelmed by having to take so many different ones. That's why I've been using Heights Vitals as part of my new daily routine. I wake up, get ready, take 2 capsules, and that's literally it. Vitals combines 20 essential vitamins, nutrients, and minerals, which would normally mean taking around 14 different supplements, but it's all in one simple formula, supporting both your brain and your body health. For me, it's helped me to stay focused on long days, keep my energy nice and steady throughout the week, and it's massively improved my sleep, which makes a real difference to how I think and show up every day. I also really value how flexible it is. You can take it with or without food, and at any time of day, which really matters when your routine isn't always predictable. Even if I forget it in the morning, I know I can still take it later and stay consistent. And you don't just have to take my word for it. Vitals is backed by hundreds of scientific studies and has been developed alongside leading experts. So if you're looking for a simple way to support your focus, energy, and overall health as you work towards your own goals, you can check out Heights in the link below in the show notes. And you can use the code WishIKnew20 for 20% off in your first month. That's WishIKnew20 for 20% off your first month. I hope you love it just as much as I do. It's so interesting because I think you've done it in the perfect way where you've got a few, like, some good experience behind you. You've gone out, like you said, if you decide to flip it back, you're only losing a couple of years
Yeah.
and you're not starting from scratch. And I think that there is definitely this, I mean, I do really believe that like everything is figure outable and that no matter what situation you're in, you can always change and pivot your path regardless. But I think it's so smart and strategic that you've thought of it that way, especially in your 20s, because that's the time when you've got to be able to experiment with things, right? And this is what I say to a lot of people, like mentees, and I do some mentoring where people will say, "What should I do?" I'm like, "Go move city, start a
Yeah.
business, go travel." Like, because when you have children and, or if you have children, that, life doesn't get easier with time. It only gets more difficult in the sense of how much more responsibility you add to your plate. So while your plate has got no responsibility, just get out there and do it.
I completely agree, and that's the approach I've picked because I knew that otherwise I would have more responsibilities, as you said, and it would become like only harder.
Yeah, exactly. Not impossible, but it's hard. Yeah, it's definitely much harder. And what inspired you to come up with the idea for Elevate?
So it really started, I would say, as a personal frustration. So it was a very selfish move in a sense that, so I was like really, kind of like working so much, really burnt out, and inevitably the stress like caught up with me. And it started to show signs like in terms of like health. Would it be both like mental health and physical health? So when I, kind of like finally took the time to see a doctor, do some exams, the doctor told me, listen, you have like two options. Either you kind of take a bit of time off to really recover, or you try to, kind of like sleep more, exercise more, eat properly, because I was always like skipping lunch because I didn't really have time, or I was eating something, crap in front of my laptop. And of course, kind of like taking time off was not an option. So I was like, okay, I can't sleep more either because it doesn't depend on me. Of course, I would love to sleep more and go to bed early. But I can still try to make, nutrition and movement like a priority in my life. So it's when I started to exercise, and also exercise, I would say, change the type of exercise I would do, because before that I used to do the type of exercise that would like really stress my body and like spike my cortisol, like, Soul Cycle or like co-works, which is great when you need to let the stress out, but at the same time it really stresses your body. So I started to do some gentle movement like Pilates, walking to go to work, for example. And after the gym, when I was on my way to the office, I was like, okay, now I'm craving like a nice breakfast option, and I couldn't find anything out there. I think that all the options that were out there were like full of hidden sugars. And I don't want to drink a juice in the morning that has like 80 grams of sugar. Or like what I was finding on like supermarket shelves, like protein shakes and drinks that are full of like additives and like artificial stuff in there. So I was like, no, this is not what I want to put in my body, because right now I've also come to understand that what you put in your body is really your fuel. So it needs to be like really clean, and you need to read the label, what's going on, because I don't want to eat something and just because it's written protein on it, I think it's healthy.
Yeah.
Most of the time it ends up being like ultra processed food. So you better off like eating something else. So it's just like when I came to that realization that there was a gap in the market, that I thought it was like really interesting, especially when thinking of the US market, where there are so many like good options for like smoothies and like healthy breakfast, protein shakes, everything. That I decided to do a bit of research on the market, speak with senior people from a lot of like big brands in the UK and the US. And I really applied my private equity approach in that regards because I was, of course, like risk averse and didn't want to like leave my job like without a proper plan. I spent like I would say 4 to 6 months doing some proper market research, trying to understand, the big wellness trends, seeing like if that could be like a profitable business model, how to scale. Because again, the idea was not to just open my coffee shop, but really create like a global brand. So I spent some time also like researching that before starting.
Mm. It's so interesting, and you're so right on um the options that we've got here are just not the same as anywhere else in the world. I mean, I find the US especially like I used to love when I traveled to the US a lot for work. I would love it because you can just go there and it's easy.
Yeah.
Like you know what you're going to get. You can go to any supermarket and you know that you'll have like a healthy alternative. When you're trying to be conscious is really powerful. And when you're like on the go, it's always like you've got it there. Whereas here, yeah, like protein bars, I think I looked at a protein bar versus like a normal chocolate bar, and the protein bar is actually like worse. Like I don't know what.
I'm not surprised, to be
Yeah.
honest. I'm
Yeah.
really not surprised. So that was like my main like pain point, and I also figured out that some people, would feel the same way. And if my breakfast is gonna be like 80 grams of sugar, I'd rather eat maybe a croissant for breakfast
Yeah.
rather than something that is like seemingly healthy.
Yeah.
So the whole idea of Elevate was that you could come in the store and you were sure of like what you would get.
Yeah.
And you could also kind of like get this full transparency and customize everything to tailor it to like your diet or your taste.
And how did you come up with the name Elevate?
It actually came like, I don't know, I was like thinking about it and I was like, I like the name Elevate because for me it's the idea of, and it came quite naturally because I had this idea of like inspiring people, and I wanted to be more than just like a food and beverage brand. I wanted really for people to come to the store, get their smoothie or protein shake and feel like elevated, like they've done something for themselves and they're gonna have a good day, if they've done that, they've like made something for them. So that was really the idea behind that, but it really came like naturally. I think I was working on this project, and at some point I was like, "Oh, that sounds nice." So yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's such a great name. A really, really great name. Um, and so when you had the idea, what was like the process that you went through to actually launch? Because am I right in saying you like retrained as a barista?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So I left my job, and I was like, okay, now I have this great idea. I need to raise a bit of money because it's actually quite expensive, to start like a retail project, especially in London. So I knew that I needed to raise a bit of money, and I thought, okay, like, I'm gonna raise money. I'm gonna be speaking with investors, and for being an investor myself, like, what would be the reasons for which I would like decline the investment? Because at the time, I was like pre-revenue, pre-store, pre-product, pre-anything. So I was just like pitching a piece of paper, basically an idea on a piece of paper. So I thought, okay, I think that the first thing, I would kind of like flag is the fact that I don't have any operational experience as a barista. So I decided to, correct that and go work as a barista for 2 months. And it was definitely like, I think like the best thing I could do, because I've learned so much like on the job, just like
Yeah.
understanding, the processes, like how, like the staffing works, speaking with like customers, seeing what like works well. But also I think, just understanding like what it is to be a barista. And I always I've always thought that to be a good leader, you need to lead by example and like knowing what you're talking about and having done also the kind of like hard part. So it was definitely like very rich in learnings. And for sure, when I was like pitching to people and they were like, oh, okay, I love that, but you don't have any operational experience. I was so like proud when I was like, I'm currently working as a barista. So I actually know what I'm talking about.
I love that. Like, and I really believe that as well. Like, you're only a good leader if you know how to do the things that you're
Yeah.
delegating to a degree. But it makes you more respectable as well, I think,
Yes.
to the people that you hire, because they appreciate that you've been in their shoes and you know how
Yes.
it works. Did you ever feel any like fear of judgment, like going from a big swanky bank to then retraining as a barista? Like, what was your like, I guess, thought? How did you feel and think about that in the moment?
So I think, I've actually kept that a secret from most people, I would say, for the time that I was there. And I've kind of like told my friends after, being like, oh, hey, by the way, I've done that. Haha, so funny. And, I was like very scared that people would judge me or like make fun of me. But I was also like terrified to, meet somebody that I know and that this person was like, what are you doing here? Like, it's kind of,
It is strange, isn't it? Like, it's strange in certain countries that that's like the thing.
and that's so
Yeah.
crazy, I think, how we can get attached to like our social status and like
Yeah.
perception that people have of us.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was like definitely like very scared of that. I think also, when I interviewed for the role, I said that I was like transitioning and I wanted to resume my studies and do something else. So I wasn't, honestly, I didn't feel any like judgment, I would say, from my colleagues and the people I was working with.
Yeah.
I've actually made some friends. But it was more from, people from my, I would say, former life, where I was kind of scared of like what people would think of, for sure.
It's such a brave thing.
And honestly, like also something to note about like the I would say the attachment to social status is that it actually took me a bit of time when I was, still launching Elevate, was kind of meeting people in like social situations when they're saying, oh, what do you do? I would always start saying, oh, I used to work in finance and now I'm doing this. And it took me time to kind of like realize I was like still saying this as if it was like a validation of
Yes.
something, of like my worth and, what I've done before. So it was definitely a transition to say, oh, yeah, it's actually like I'm launching like a smoothie bar and like it's not open yet. Like it's still very much work in progress.
Yeah.
But I've definitely like noticed that for sure.
It's incredible, isn't it? Because I feel like there's a real it's like your identity
Yes.
is attached
Yep.
to either the name or the industry that
Yep.
you work in. And I can relate to that a lot, actually, leaving corporate, and my last role was at Amazon. And when I first went out on my own, people would say, what do you do? And I'd say, I just left my job at Amazon and did it. And it takes a while, doesn't it, to realize actually I'm Julia,
Yeah.
not Julia from or Julia who works in, I'm Julia and this is what I'm doing. It's funny because that identity and attachment, and like we said earlier about like external
Yep.
measures of success, still linger in some ways, right?
No, 100%. But also something that I've noticed, like going through all of this, is that, it's actually not the most successful people that are going to judge you. Like the most successful, like entrepreneurs, investors, they would always kind of like say, oh, that's amazing, go for it.
Yeah.
And they would never judge you for doing something that can seem a bit like crazy. And, I've noticed that the judgment, or maybe what I thought would be judgment, was potentially coming from people that would not do anything and get stuck in that loop. So once you kind of like realize that, and also realize the second thing is that we always like overthink what people would think of us. Like people don't think that much of ourselves. Like I think like we do think a lot more than we do think a lot more of ourselves than what people do. Like everybody's self-absorbed at the end. So I think that once I've realized that, it was actually quite freeing to to just like do my thing and be happy about that and be like, yeah, I'm Julia, I'm opening a smoothie bar, or I like to do this and I like to do that.
Yeah.
And just detach myself from this like previous role.
It's so true. And I just thought of that like saying that people say where when you're looking at people that are making opinions or judgments of you, you shouldn't trust someone's opinion who you wouldn't go and ask for.
Yeah.
So if you wouldn't go and ask that person for advice, why should you listen to their opinion? And I do feel like more often than not, the people that have the opinions, like you say, are the people that are not doing it themselves. And it's actually like self-projection versus actual genuine advice.
No, that's very true. And I think I've also noticed that while kind of like building in public and before opening, that, you know, when you build in public and try to put yourself out there, which is like the hardest thing to do, because obviously some people are gonna come and like comment on like your TikTok or everything. So it's true that it's something, you know, that I think you need to kind of like go through the process to actually learn that and be like, okay, it's not like that important. I'm not gonna value what they have to say, or just kind of like taking it because it might be good feedback sometimes, but you know, it's also learning how to kind of like detach yourself from that for sure.
Hi, my loves. Just a quick pause to say if you're enjoying Wish I Knew, please, please, please hit the subscribe button and leave a quick rating or review. It really makes such a difference to the show and helps us to keep bringing you amazing guests and stories. Now, let's get back to the episode. And speaking of building in public, so you decided to publicly speak about what you were building before you actually launched, right?
Yeah.
Which is an amazing strategy. I mean, was it meant to be a strategy or was it just...
So I think it was like for me in a way. So I started actually posting on like TikTok and Instagram almost a year ago. So that was like December. I remember it was like between Christmas and New Year, you know, like when you're just home not doing much. I was like, okay, I'm gonna start posting. And for me, I think it was almost a way to kind of like trap myself into action, in the sense I was like, okay, if I put it out there, now it's out there and I have to do it. Because of course, I'm not going to tell you that the journey was like a slow ride and, you know, that I didn't have any doubts. I had a lot of doubts on the journey, and a lot of times I was like, okay, am I doing the right thing? Like, should I give up? Should I pivot? Should I do something else? So I think that in a way it was for me to be like, okay, now you've raised the money, you have to do it, and like don't kind of like, there's no way back. So I started posting on TikTok, and you know, the first video I posted actually went viral and I got like close to 1 million views. And I remember that my worst fear when posting it was like, oh, I hope it does well, but I hope that no one from work like sees it.
Yeah.
And like literally the first week of January, one of my best friends from like my first job like texts me and is like, oh, by the way, like we're having lunch and like the partners are discussing your TikTok video. And I was like,
Oh my goodness.
like that was quite funny, but I think that it was great because once, you know, you've kind of been confronted to your worst fear and you notice that nothing happens, you're like, okay, that's fine. I can just keep posting and build in public. And again, it's kind of like, I would say it's a good like reinforcing loop. And honestly, even though there were, of course, like always when you post something on socials, like a couple of mean comments, I would say 99% of the comments were like words of encouragement and people reaching out and saying, this is amazing. Like, you know, I've been thinking of leaving my finance job as well, my consulting job, my law firm, whatever. And like, I'm cheering for you. And, you know, so many people were just like, go for it, and like cheering like for me, that it was definitely like a great thing to do and like build this community before opening.
Wow, that is incredible. I actually saw, I think it must have been that first post, but I remember seeing
That's
it.
crazy.
Yeah. And thinking at the time, oh my God, that's so inspirational.
Oh my God, thank you.
Yeah. So, yeah, honestly, it's incredible. And I think that you're right in the sense of once you say something out loud or you post it, I mean, posting it is different because you've got nearly 1 million people that have seen it now.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
you have to do the thing.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, okay, I have to do it. I didn't know they would like get viral and kind of like just like kick off the journey like that. But for sure now I was like, okay, that's the proof I needed. Now I need to trust the process and keep going.
And what did you like feel in the moment of like having a post go viral that you didn't expect?
So it was honestly like very surprising but exciting. And it was the first time also that was kind of like seeing that some people, like very having interaction, let's say, with people that are external from my circle of like friends or like former colleagues or family, that were, discussing the idea with me as well. So it was great to get feedback. And some people were saying, oh yeah, this is very much needed. Like, please, like, do this type of thing. Had some like vegan options, like add the macros, like, so I think it was great to kind of like get the feedback from the community and people like that cared about that to really understand how, we could like make the product like almost perfect for the audience and really do something that people wanted to get.
It's incredible. And how did you find going to investors and pitching for investment? I know there's the stat that is still like, I can't believe it's even a stat, but the fact that 2% of females get
Yeah.
investment in the UK.
Yeah, that's honestly that's a very, I would say, not concerning, but at the same time it's also, I think it's can also be explained because women are launching less businesses. And I think it's also because we internalize more the kind of like pressure of like doing well, waiting for everything to be perfect before going to investors. While I think that potentially male counterparts, like they're like, okay, I have this idea, and they go out, they pitch it, and they are maybe more confident, I would say, overall. And it's something that I've noticed as well, like when I was like more on the investing side, that women, we tend to wait for everything to be perfect. And this is something that I was also kind of like waiting for, in the sense I was like, no, I can't speak to investors if I haven't figured out perfectly from like this thing and this thing. But actually, I've noticed that, clarity comes from like action and also kind of like discussing ideas with other people. Um, so definitely like I had to kind of like push myself to go out there and like pitch investors. And it's, definitely not a walk in the park, for sure. It was really tough. Especially when, you're raising, like, your first time entrepreneur, raising money for an industry that, is not mine. I didn't have like extensive experience in hospitality, didn't have like a store open. So that was like an extra layer of difficulty, let's say. But I think that the advantage that I got is that I was coming from the investing world. So I knew like what people would expect, knew what numbers I needed to kind of like work towards, and how to kind of like pitch a good concept, I would say, to investors.
What advice would you give to other women who are looking to get investment?
I would say start before it's perfect. Really, it's, just put yourself out there, speak with some people. I think that a lot of times, like, you realize that it's by having those conversations with people that might be investor, might not even be investor, might be like random people that you meet like at like social events, or but that really come from like this external point of view. Because a lot of times I've noticed that friends or family, they tend to be a bit biased and they try to comfort you and say, oh yeah, that's a good idea, or having maybe potentially like the other, um I would say extreme opposite, where they would be like, oh no, that's a terrible idea, don't do that. So I think it's always good to have like some external feedback to get like constructive feedback and observations and how you can improve. So definitely start before it's perfect. And don't also, I would say, don't kind of like hold to your idea and make it a secret. I really believe that, idea is maybe 5% of the project. The rest is 95% execution. So don't be afraid of like someone stealing your idea, because if it's not you doing it, it's going to be different anyway. So I would say like just put yourself out there.
I love that. That's so inspiring. I mean, that links back to you building in public as well, right?
Yeah.
Because you have to be comfortable with the fact that people might steal and copy. And I
Yeah.
think it's such an interesting topic. Actually, I think there was a podcast I listened to with Simon Sinek,
Yep.
who was talking about this exact same concept and was saying he tells everyone his ideas, and he was like, I tell everyone my ideas. I don't keep my ideas secret, because your idea is only as good as your execution, right? So like, if someone else wants to steal it or copy it, great, but like, how they deliver something will be completely different to you.
Yeah, and that's also like, again, like start with your why, like being like, okay, like you're a specific person with like a specific why. And I think like it all come down like to your why you started this, why you're doing this. And this is also what, will make you different and like make you like execute differently and also kind of go through hard times in the long run. Because, entrepreneurship, and I'm sure you know this because now you're like working for yourself, it's a lot of like highs and lows. So for sure you need to have like a strong reason for doing things, otherwise it's really easy to give up. And I really believe that if someone wants to come and like copy and whatever idea it is, if they're not like, if they don't feel strongly enough about it, at some point like there's a chance they would also like give up, because it really becomes tough at some point. It can't be always like easy, for sure.
Yeah. And so Elevate has launched. You have your store in the Royal Exchange.
Yes,
that's right.
that's
in
correct.
Bank. When did you launch?
So we opened at the end of June 25, so like 4 months ago now.
Amazing. And how's the response been?
So it's been great. I was really kind of like surprised to see that it took off like so fast. And I think it was from like the second or third week that, we started like seeing really big queues at the door. And I was a bit like shocked, being like, oh my God, what is going on? So it definitely felt, like surreal when we were like, at peak time, like during lunch hour, that we're selling like a smoothie per minute. I was like, oh my God, like this is crazy. So yeah, the response has been great. But I've been working behind the bar as well, of course. And for me, it was great to do that, to speak with customers, to also get some feedback, because of course, like the product was not perfect when we launched, and we've done so many like improvement on the product now that I'm almost like cringing when I think of the first version. I'm like, oh my God. But that's a good thing, in terms of product improvement.
It's a really good point, actually, because there is this famous quote in the like tech world that says, if you're really proud of the first version of your product, you launched it too late.
Yes.
And I think it's so true that like the first version of your product, you should feel really cringe.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, okay, like now the priority is to make it exist, and we can like perfect it, later on. And just taking this approach of like getting 1% better every day and making those improvements, those small improvements, to get to a place where, the product is great. But I can't say that right now the product is 100% perfect. There's always something we can improve. So that's definitely like an interesting part of my job right now, is to kind of like spot those like micro improvement and like really try to deliver like a seamless customer experience, and, think about the things that you wouldn't think as a customer, but we kind of like make them to make your experience really seamless.
Definitely. And what plans have you got for the future that you can talk about?
So we're actively looking at the second location. So the idea would be to open it first half of 26. So actually very soon, like in like 6 to 8 months. And that would be more west, because I've got like so many requests from people being like, oh my God, like you need to come like west, and we don't have like anything like that, but the city is a bit too far. So that's definitely like, I would say, like the big project that I'm working on at the moment. Yeah.
Exciting.
Yes.
Let me know. I live west, and I'm the type of person that only...
Where do you live?
I'm in Chelsea.
Oh yeah, me too. But that's that would be really nice, Chelsea. But no, I'm thinking a bit more central, more in the kind of like Marylebone, Mayfair area.
Lovely. Yeah.
Chelsea and Notting Hill are like definitely on the radar.
Yeah, for sure. And it is true that like I think people now spend more time in their areas than before. Like I don't really leave west.
You agree, on the weekends I'm like very, territorial.
I started my podcast here at Cube in The Frame, their flagship podcast studio. and it changed the game for me. With my membership, I work alongside a professional production team, so it looks polished and sounds incredible as soon as the cameras start rolling. They also have smaller self-service podcast studios with different set options, so you can choose the vibe that fits you. Membership here starts from £145 a month. If you've been thinking about launching a podcast, visit thecube.com or click the link in the show notes below. And okay, so in terms of stores, you're looking at a new store.
Yeah.
In terms of wellness, like what do you think is like in the future of the wellness space?
So I think that, consumers are more and more like educated and savvy. So I think that a lot of brands that are selling those kind of like wellness aesthetics or without doing the actual work will have to pivot, because I think now people, they start reading the labels, they're aware of what's like ultra processed food, and like that you shouldn't have it like all the time. So it's a bit like the example you mentioned of the maybe protein bar, where you're like, okay, this looks seemingly healthy, but I think a lot of people are also realizing that it's actually not. So I really hope that the industry like moves in that direction, with more like transparency. But I really see it like moving that way, because consumers really know what they're talking about, and they love to educate themselves. And there is definitely more interest around like the whole like longevity trend as well.
Yes.
And it really starts with like what you put in your body, right?
I mean, I'm obsessed with all the longevity trends. I'm not like a biohacker or anything like that, but I definitely have friends who are like deep in that
Yeah.
space, and I can see how now, like it's really working, because I've got a lot of friends who are now in their 40s, look amazing, feel amazing, because they live and breathe by these different practices. But B, how like easily accessible this information is now.
Yeah.
Whereas before it maybe was a little bit more woo-woo and, kind of conspiracy style, whereas now it feels like a lot of this stuff is actually quite accessible.
Yeah, and it's much more, I would say, science-backed, data-driven. Like you can really try to optimize if you want to. And I think that was also the idea with Elevate, where we wanted to incorporate those kind of like science-backed ingredients. Would be like supplements you would take at home, but maybe, you can't be bothered to put some collagen in your coffee. It's a bit messy. Or maybe you forgot to take like your protein powder. So that was really the idea, to kind of like work around like really science-backed ingredients, the ones that are not like woo at all, and like proven to work and benefit.
Yeah.
And, have that like on the go for sure.
And what's your opinion of creatine? Because creatine is everywhere at the moment. Everyone's talking about it. How comes you put that into a smoothie?
So I think that creatine is actually, if I'm corrected, one of the most studied supplements out there, and one of like the oldest one. I think it's just like it's having its moment right now. And I think that it's depending the way it's marketed. A lot of people saw that as a kind of like, kind of like bulking supplement, like for the gym bros and people that really want to get like volumes in their muscle. But it's actually not only that, it's a great supplement when it comes to like brain function and also like muscle recovery overall. I think a lot of people are scared, especially women, that it would like make them bulk. But if you're not doing any kind of like exercise at the gym to kind of like gain volumes in terms of like muscle, it will literally help you tone your muscle, because the more like muscle mass you have, the more energy it consumes. So it will like literally consume like maybe the fat layers you have like on your belly, and so it will help you have like this kind of like toned abs and everything. But again, you need to make sure that you consume it in, I would say, the right amounts. There are very specific dosage depending on like how much you exercise, your weight, everything. So it's more understanding like that you're getting the dose that works like for yourself.
Yeah.
And also I would say in the right format. For us, for example, we use like pure creatine. We put it in like protein shake, or you can add it to whatever you want on the menu, basically. And that's the way I feel comfortable like doing it, for example, rather than taking gummies, or where it's a bit gimmicky maybe in the way it's it's presented. I don't know. I think it's great to have just like the pure ingredient in this like pure form when you know how
Yes.
many grams you're getting. So if you know that you need to have, let's say, 3 grams a day, you can come to us and say, okay, how many grams of creatine are in this like specific shake? 3 grams. Okay, perfect. If I want to double that, I can double that, and you know exactly what you're getting.
Great. Yeah, it's so interesting. And I have heard that for women, it's really key for toning
Yes.
your muscles. Maybe that's why it's having its like
Yes.
moment now because everyone wants to be super toned. But like, I've just heard loads of things about people saying that like creatine was like the game changer
Yes.
for them in terms of supplements. And it's so true as well. I have so many supplements at home and I just don't take them because if I was going to take them all in the mornings, I would literally have like 10 capsules before I've even had my first
Yeah.
drink.
And it's time consuming, you know. You
Yeah.
don't really have time to do it, or it's not like always like a nice ritual. So I think that, you know, having those things like very targeted with a specific function integrated in your drinks when you're on the go, and like also it's like addressed to, for example, busy professionals that don't really have time.
Yeah.
I think that's the perfect way to do it.
Okay, I'm sold. I'm gonna go get some
Okay,
creatine.
new customer, yes.
Yeah. And so you're also an angel investor, right?
Yeah.
How did you get into angel investing?
So I started to get into angel investing when I was working in private equity. At the time, the firm I was working for was like launching their VC arm, and I was working on the launch of their of this investment fund. And so we were looking at very, I would say, much smaller companies rather to what we used to look, because you know, when it comes to like the size of companies I was looking at in my previous job, it was really companies valued like a couple of like billions pound. So very different. So I started to kind of like meet with entrepreneurs, always in the consumer space, because I was focusing on consumer, which is quite nice. So wellness brands, beauty brands, luxury brands, and it's where I kind of like came across that. And I think for me it was a good way to learn, and really learn about like maybe the earlier investment stage, because you know the needs of a startup are like completely different from a company that is like well established and generates like hundreds of millions of pounds like a year. It's very different. So it was a great way to learn, but also I would say, so intrigued by like the entrepreneurship world. And, you know, in hindsight, I'm like, okay, that was also my way to kind of like get into like entrepreneurship and look at that from a different perspective. And I was always thinking, oh my God, like these founders are like so cool. And that's also when I knew that I wanted to do something like that as well.
That's so cool. And so how do you actually go about becoming an angel investor? I think I'm going to speak from experience for women. It's something that we don't necessarily talk about or learn about in school or like know as much about as our male counterparts in a very generalist way. So how would someone like go about becoming an angel investor?
So in my particular case, I actually invested in one of the companies we were looking at with my fund, and the fund actually declined to invest in it. So I remember going for coffee with the founder and be like, oh yeah, I'm really sorry. Like, I really love the project. I really try to push that internally. But you know, it's not like their focus at the moment when it comes to the sector. And I remember he told me, but why don't you invest? I was like, what do you mean? Like, you know, I'm not like rich. I don't have like crazy amounts of like money to invest. So I think that the first thing I kind of like learned was to realize that you don't need to be like a millionaire to invest. You can also invest like very small tickets. Obviously, like each founder will have like their minimum ticket size, but I know some people invest as little as like £500, £1,000. Like,
Wow.
I started investing with like tickets between ten to £20,000 in the companies. But for me, it was also a way of like diversifying like my investment, and like also investing the money I was like making at my job, so to avoid like spending everything. So
Yeah.
that was I think that was a good way. But I think for someone that is like completely, I would say, new to this world, I think that, you know, there are great like angel investors network out there in the UK that, you know, you don't need to be living in London to join them, and you can really start doing that, and also doing it with also other investors that are maybe more like experienced, you can learn, because like some of those angel syndicates, for example, they would do the full due diligence. So you don't have to kind of like, of course, you have to do your due diligence, but you don't have to kind of like start from scratch if you don't know anything about like how to conduct a due diligence.
Yeah.
So I think that this is a really good way to start. And then once you kind of like start investing, start taking part of those networks, and also advertise it maybe like on your LinkedIn that you invested in this company and this company, I think a lot of like opportunities will also like come to you. But again, I think especially if you don't have like previous knowledge of finance or investing world, it's really good to start with a network that can like support you in understanding the risk.
Yeah.
Because there's obviously like the risk that you can lose like all of your money, like nothing is guaranteed. And I've had a couple of investments that went to zero, but that's also the game. So
yeah.
it's fine in the sense that I was also aware that was like a risk.
Yeah, it's so interesting because we don't learn about this stuff.
No.
And it's so interesting. I didn't even know that there were angel syndicates out there that could basically help hold your hand through the whole process.
Yeah, exactly. And they would kind of like filter the inbounds that they get to just kind of like focus on the company they think are like interesting. Then they do the full due diligence and like do it like with the founders. They do like some multiple stage of like investment committees. And then, they present it to the network, to the syndicate saying, okay, like if you want to invest, the minimum ticket is, I don't know, 5,000, 2,000. Do you want to invest? You kind of like review everything and then you make your own choice.
Yeah.
So I think that it's really a good way to start for sure.
It's incredible. And I think that we're just getting more and more resources about
Yes.
investments and how to manage your money and personal finances. I saw something the other day. Someone was saying that like the wealthiest people have, I think it was like 80% of their money invested. And because you can't earn a decent return or get, make your money work really hard for you if it's sitting in cash. So it's really interesting that actually we're seeing more accessible ways of people being able to make investments and enter into the sector, but without having, like you said, the need to be like a millionaire to be able to start.
No, definitely. And I think, also something that I would add is that it's like always important to kind of like diversify like your investment and understanding like what you're doing, what are the risks, because of course investing always like is attached to risk. But I think that nowadays there are a lot of like resources out there, easily accessible and free. Like, there are so many great accounts on like TikTok that are really like demystifying investments.
Yeah.
Now you can ask like tons of things to ChatGPT. You know what I mean? Like there are really like a lot of ways that you can just like educate yourself. So I think it's really great that there is more like transparency in the investment world for sure.
Yeah. Well, congrats and fingers crossed for all of your investments.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're going to move to quick fire wrap. What is the best piece of advice you've ever received?
I would say clarity comes from action. That's honestly like, again, like to go back to my point of like trying to have everything figured out and having everything perfect before starting. It never works like that in the real world. So I think that once you start doing, there is some sort of like relief and you kind of like understand things better, and like it's really easier to put the pieces of the puzzle together.
I absolutely love that. And it's so true. A no that turned out to be a blessing in disguise.
I think maybe when I was looking for the first location of Elevate, there was a location I really, really liked in Notting Hill. But now I'm so happy that we got the one we have right now at the Royal Exchange, because the footfall is, amazing. And I think that was the perfect spot to open the first one. So yeah.
Incredible. It also looks like a beautiful space
Yes,
as well.
the building is like just beautiful. The site is not too big, so it's perfect to kind of like learn how to manage everything. So I really think like I couldn't have had like a more perfect site. And it kind of, the learning from that is, like no is not like necessarily like a failure. It's more often, I would say, like a redirection.
Definitely. A daily habit or ritual that keeps you elevated.
Love that. I think that the first thing I do in the morning, when I, take my coffee and breakfast is journaling. So I'm planning my day really meticulously, and I really love the productivity method planner.
Yes, I got
It's
that
so
recently.
good. And so I'm really like planning every single thing in there. And so for me, it like gives me a lot of like clarity about like my planning, what I need to do during the day, how to be efficient, like how to block time. And I also like to write like maybe 4 or 5 things that I'm grateful for, just to start the day like in a good mood. And I'm doing that like every single day without failing.
That's amazing. I know I'm the worst for starting with a journal and then by day 2 or day
Yeah,
3.
it's hard, but I think, once you start like doing it and you see like the benefits of like how much it makes my day like easier, I'm like, okay, sold. Just
Yeah.
doing it every single day. Yeah.
Good, good. A book or podcast that you recommend to everyone?
Oh, I think maybe Manifest from Roxy Nafusi. I think I've bought this book for like at least 4 to 5 of my
Yeah.
friends. It's just like such a good book, and just again like gives so much, I would say, like actionable tools about like how to make your dreams come true. And again, a lot of people see manifesting as something a bit like woo, but it's actually more a way of like planning around that and making things happen.
I love that book as well. I've actually bought it for so many people. It's such
Yeah,
a great
it's
gift
so good.
because it
Yes.
looks nice as well.
Yeah, it's the perfect gift for sure.
But I love how she's really taken a concept that is quite woo-woo and abstract and actually just made it really simple
Yep.
and really cool.
And really actionable. Like
Yes.
it's not something where you like it's not wishful thinking, right? You have to have actually change your mindset, change like the actions that you're doing every day. And I think like this book gives the tool to do that, because if nothing changes, nothing changes.
Yes.
So you need to actually implement some change to see some
Yes.
results. And I think a lot of people don't realize that and think, oh yeah, I'm just gonna manifest and write something on my vision board, and then they get frustrated when they're like, oh, it didn't happen.
Yes, yes. It's so true. I mean, have you used manifesting as part of your like life and work for some time or?
Yeah, I think like I use it daily in the sense that I set myself some goals. So of course we could say that I'm like, kind of like doing the steps to manifest daily, in the sense that, if I have like this goal of opening a second store, I'm going to do everything I can, like when it comes to like my actions, the mindset, the things that I'm going to do daily to get closer to that goal. So in a sense, it's just like very concrete steps that you need to do, but it's just having this big picture in mind that really helps as well to, like stay focused on like the end goal or where you want to be.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm a big fan of manifesting and vision boards
Yeah.
and writing things down. I think that's where journaling actually
Yeah.
really comes into it as well. I've like got a million like scrappy lists of all the things I want to achieve. And I don't even know where half of them are. So I'll probably discover them at some point later on and figure out if they worked or not.
And
But
then you really realize you're like, yeah, my dream came true.
I had it actually with my last role, which was at Amazon, where I was in another role before, and I wrote down all of the things that I thought my next move might be, because I was kind of in a really good position, wasn't in a place to like jump immediately, but I was thinking there could be something else out there for me. And I literally wrote down like big company, this is what the title's going to be. I'm not going to manage more than 3 people because I had a big team at my other one, and I didn't like that, like managing a team. Salary, like over X amount, and basically wrote down like 10 things. And within a few months, the Amazon role had actually like come to me from someone in my network.
That's amazing.
And it ticked every single one of those boxes. And then, you go through the interview process and you realize, oh, that actually was what that thing was. So you're right. It's in the sense of putting out there to the universe what it is that you want, but then acting with intent and following through as well.
100%.
Yeah.
It's all about like intention and your thoughts, because you will then manifest into your action.
Exactly. I've taken our quickfire on a total tangent. Sorry. A founder or brand that you really admire?
I would say Grace Beverly. I think she's amazing. I mean, she's really young, managing like a couple of like businesses. I don't know, it's like 3, 4 businesses, maybe more. And I think I just like love her energy and the way she shares things. I don't know how she does it all. possibly like a planner, but
Yeah.
but yeah, I think it's really like I think a great entrepreneur, and I really admire her.
I second that. I'm a big Grace
Yeah.
Bentley fan. I think I love that she's so approachable and like she seems quite down to earth in
Yeah.
the way that she shares her life, but at the same time is doing so many incredible
Yeah.
things.
No,
Yeah.
she's incredible.
And a lesson or a quote that you live by.
Um, it's more, so I would say more lesson than a quote. And it's from the Atomic Habits book from James Clear, which is getting 1% better every day. I think that's really, this idea that from changes in like small actions, they will compound in like big results. And something that I've realized is that we tend to kind of like underestimate, the change that can happen in like a short period of time, and like overestimate what could happen in like a long period of time, 10 years, for example, where we think, oh yeah, in 10 years, everything's going to be different. But if you don't act on your habits that kind of like, are just like compound into what your life is becoming, then nothing's going to ever change. So I really believe in like doing those small, like incremental actions, and like really one step at a time.
I love that. That made me think of when I was at the gym yesterday and I was like pushing myself to do an extra K. But you're right, it all adds up over time, and that's the only way that you change
Exactly.
things, right? What a perfect place to finish. Thank you so much for joining us, Julia. I'm really excited for this to come out.
Thank you so much for having me.